Hello and welcome back to the Conversations with Kristi podcast. There are two kinds of people in the child safety space, the ones who talk about it when something goes wrong and the ones who've been in the rooms, done the work and been saying it for years before anyone was ready to listen. Nicole Talarico is the second kind. She's a trainer, consultant, author and early childhood specialist who's spent decades embedding safeguarding into the culture of services, not as a compliance exercise, but as a genuine commitment to keeping kids safe. Her book, Asserting a Culture of Child Safety, came out before the sector was ready to hear it, and now the sector is catching up. Today, Nicole and I talk about what it actually takes to create safety, not just policies on paper, but the culture, the conversations, and the courage to sit with the uncomfortable, because that is what this work really is. Let's get into my chat with Nicole. Well, here we are, Nicole. Finally, we get to catch up. This has been a long time coming, but I'm super excited to chat to you today. And I was just saying to you that I record the intro afterwards. And usually how I start these podcasts is, how did I meet you? And I think it was around the time that I released my book. You bought my book and you reached out to me. That's how I met you originally.
Absolutely, it is.
You bought my book. You were one of the first to buy my book.
I did buy your book, and for those people that know me well, they know that I need a hard copy. There's no online reading here. So I highlighted your book and I had Post-it notes all over it. And I'm like, yes, I am loving this, because back when you wrote that, there wasn't many people with, really lived experience of seeing the other side of what perpetrators and offenders, what appealed to me was that you knew the insides of that side.
Yeah. I really appreciated you buying it, because it was such an honor. Like, you've written your own book, right? So it's one of those things where, like, when you're writing it, you're like, will anyone ever read this?
True. And you think, oh my gosh, I'm being so pedantic about how
the small things.
Yeah, how I'm saying this, how I want this to land. Hang on, people are going to read this, right? And no, you're constantly having that narrative in your head.
Are they going to read it? What are they going to take from it? And the other thing that happens is, are they going to read it? And then, oh my God, people are going to read this. Like the other side, oh my God, people are actually going to read this.
Yeah. And then you go back over going, oh, have I articulated that in the right language so that I'm really making clear what I'm trying to say here? And I'm being really, careful and ethical in the way that I'm saying this. I've got to really read back over. And at some point, I think I just went, oh my gosh, I cannot read this anymore.
I know.
Yeah.
And I mean, your book's called Asserting a Culture of Child Safety, and it's such an important book in your space and in early childhood education, but in all education and all child safety spaces, or any space that has children. I think we were on the cusp of before everyone else, and now we've got so many more books coming out, and there's so many more books in this space. So it's really cool that we were at the start of that, and that we created books that we're calling things out as it was back then.
So true. And it's funny, because I was up in the Gold Coast at the end of last week, and I never really, even though I had been presenting at conferences for years, I'd never actually thought about the fact that you can quote yourself and put your own quote on it. It's funny, because now when we're really, there has been so much legislative change, and there are, like you said, so many amazing resources and tools now, but it's funny, because I like it when you say that we were that we were early entry into actually being quite explicit about what needed to happen in terms of safeguarding. And, we know, and I think more and more people, particularly in the education sector, are now knowing that, you can have your blinkers on, but that doesn't mean things aren't happening. And it's interesting, because one of the quotes that I often like to use is that when you get complacent, you end up with abuse pretty much in your own service.
Mm-hmm.
Back in 23, writing that was that was one of the things I wanted to make really clear, is because this is going to happen, guys, if you are not becoming alert to what's going on. Fast forward, I wish we didn't know the reality of that now.
You literally called it. I'm sure you had a moment of, shit, it's in the media and it's happening. But you knew, I knew, you knew, we knew this, but no one was talking about it. And then it takes massive media coverage and, four corners coming out and saying it's happening and all of this stuff for people to stand back and go, oh, shit.
Yeah, we can do something.
They're not just like making it up.
No, and that is a bittersweet moment. You're exactly right, because you're like, there is a part of me that goes, oh, fantastic. This saturation is now going to see some,
Change.
Needed change that we've been banging on about for years. But there's also that part that goes, you know what? We could have already been so far ahead.
Yeah.
If
That's
people
our culture, though.
Isn't it, right? People like to work in damage control, unfortunately, and
yeah, it is. And it's literally the police. Like, I used to laugh at old senior constables in my job, right? So it doesn't matter which industry you're in, doesn't matter which, any kind of career path you take, people don't change anything until the shit hits the fan and they have to change it, right? So as anyone listening to this, just think back on your own situations in your own workplaces, in your own workforces, because it doesn't matter if you're someone working in an office in administration or accounting. It doesn't matter if you work in a car yard. It doesn't matter if you're working as a tradesperson. It doesn't matter who you are, where you work. Nothing changes until someone does the wrong thing.
Absolutely.
And what we saw with OC health and safety is too many people died in the workplace, so they brought in OC health and safety legislation and they brought in rules around that. Everyone was jumping up and down and making a big deal about it and saying that you're ruining the workplace, and 20 years down the track, here we are going, well, that's just how it is. The same thing can be said for child safety. Everyone's like, it's ruining it. We can't do anything. We can't, but it had to happen. And I used to laugh, and my point is I used to laugh when I was working as a police officer, because senior constables would say, oh, they've ruined the job. There's too many rules. We now have to do this, and we have to report this, and we have to write on this, and we have to have, body worn cameras, and we have to, why? And I used to just say, well, if people weren't so lazy and stupid, mind my French, but if people weren't so freaking good at trying to cut corners and do the wrong thing, we wouldn't have these rules in place. So blame the people who did it.
Yeah.
And same with the child safety if people didn't try to cut corners, cut down the amount of supervision and I know that it's not the people on the floor that it's doing it. I'm talking about management here. If we didn't mismanage the situation and we made safety a priority, we wouldn't be in the situation we're in.
That's exactly right. When you're looking at high quality professional, onboarding and training and ongoing support to keep up with what's going on, that was it, and still is the case, where it's often not prioritized. And unless there is, an enforced, and you and I know, more than anyone, having been in the police force, rules and laws and enforcement doesn't make people want to do change. It just makes, there's more talk about it, and you probably get more than one or two to actually commit to accountability.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is where there's been so, particularly in my sector, where there's been so much burnout and staff changes, there hasn't been a really robust onboarding HR and ongoing support for the varied workforce that we have lost and then are looking at filling spaces. And so, I was just talking to somebody yesterday where they were saying, oh, and now we've got to do this national rollout of child safety. That's only a problem if you don't know a lot of the content.
It's only a problem if you look at it as it's a problem. What about looking at it as the fact is that it's really important that we keep kids safe?
Right. And,
it's not a problem then when your first thought is child safety and everything else around it is an added bonus.
Yeah, I know, but it's an added burden when we're actually trying to do this work, like you and I said at the beginning, where, there's resources out there to grab onto and get more information. It's not an added burden, it's an added bonus. What else don't I know?
Yeah. Well, we've gone straight into the straight into boom. And my listeners probably are going, who is this woman and how come we've never heard of Nicole? So tell everyone exactly how you got to where you are and to the amazing author, speaker, trainer that you are, and how you're supporting, our early childhood and child safety sectors.
Oh, look, my journey, it makes me feel really old. And I know that hear people say that, come on, but really, I actually have to say that it's been a progressive journey for me. The good thing is that I started out as a preschool teacher and worked in a number of different services. And so, what I used to do was take the maternity leave positions
Oh,
because
yes.
I could move around and get my foot into the door of all these different sector types. And it didn't look bad on the resume for whatever reason. People were always coming back to their job. And I'm like, okay, it's been fun. See ya.
Yeah.
And then off and did something else. And it also meant that for some of the, I managed the childcare field officer team at the City of Monash. So I dabbled in a bit of local government team culture. And that was actually also good too, because I was only in my early 20s and people didn't really want to give team leader jobs or managers jobs in our sector to young people. But if it was a mat leave position and they knew it was going to be short filled or a year or what, they were more happy to do it. So it meant that I was really lucky. It meant that I was able to get some really good insight into the way different teams work, different sector types in our, whether it be long day care or sessional preschool or out of school hours care, vacation care. So I kind of did that. And then I was crazy because I used to go out on the school holidays and manage the vacation care program for Melbourne University.
Oh, wow. You are crazy.
Yeah, why did I do that?
You had time off, but you go, no, let's do some more work.
So I did that. And then I moved into the training space for Gowrie, Victoria. And then I had 4 children of my own. So it meant that I had enough skills and experience to be able to then go, you know what, I can consult. So I've literally consulted for when my daughter was only a couple of months old, I started my own consulting. So I've been for 20 years and I've been, I am fortunate because I have been able to support the education and care sector directly for so many years with their quality improvement planning, and they're helping them to understand how you embed compliance into everyday practice. So I continued to do that until probably the last 10 years, where I've really focused on safeguarding, because I think probably what sparked it for me was that when we would look at, the quality area, health and safety, there was always just, I don't know why, and it's still often somewhat the case where people would be really focused on everything else and the health and safety would come as an extra add-on later. So I thought, I think I need to improve, and I started medical action bags then, because I used to get really frustrated that medication would be in cupboards in staff rooms or the planet. And, I'm thinking, wow, these children's lives are at risk here if they have an anaphylactic reaction and staff don't know, or relievers don't know where the medication is. And I think that's probably what really did start safeguarding for me. And it then just turned full circle, and I was really looking at, what happens in an emergency, but what happens every day.
Yeah. What's your culture? What's your culture in this space? Like, does everyone know what to do? And people think, I think when you see the worst, you actually start, it's almost like, as a police officer, we see the worst, right? So we see what happens when people aren't prepared, aren't ready. Yeah. And as a police officer, you're prepping for the worst all the time. You're prepping for the worst. And so to me, actually, that's not a bad way to support people. As in, I mean, people are like, does your child ever worry that, like, was she ever scared because you were always thinking about the worst case scenarios? Were you ever? But I think when you get over the fear of shit going wrong and things going bad, and you realize, actually, when I think worst case scenario, I can put in place all of the safeguards to make sure that my child, any child, is safe in this environment. And we can put those like boundaries in place, and then they're safe. But you're not panicking because you're not prepared.
This is the thing. And I think that's where you ground yourself in confidence and capability, because when you've thought about like you said, worst case scenario. I'm always saying to services, think about what could happen, what could seriously happen. And every single strategy you think about and implement to mitigate harm gives you that added level of surety that you are well informed in your space. Otherwise, you're running through with blinkers on and blindfold.
Yeah. And then you're trying, like, you're Sandra Bullock in that movie. I can't remember what it's called, where she's got nothing on and she's like hands out like this.
Like this. And like, you know what? Be well prepared and I think there's some level of brave, I know when I was writing that book, there were two reasons. It was because people hadn't realized the extent of what abuse looks like. And there would, this child protection training would come up once a year, but it still was working in damage control when you thought there were concerns. But the other part about that was that, and I did mention it earlier, but it just used to really bother me that everybody had this assumption that abuse
hadn't happen
side of bubble, and we're not in a bubble. And so I actually wanted people to actually be brave enough to consider what could happen on your watch.
Yeah.
And I think that's still really hard. That's a hard pill to swallow still for a lot of educators. They find it extremely confronting. And I think some people will often say, because I have, spent a lot of time in COVID actually really connecting with, like Culture Reframed over in the UK and Thorn and lots of other, the e-safety commissioner came up, but I've done lots of stuff in the harm of pornography and sexual assault, training, and then the last couple of years working directly in that space in child protection and the Orange Door. But I think, when you a bit similar to what you were saying, when you actually know the extent of what happens, what is often alarming for some people is just, it's not shocking anymore. So I think maybe for me, I think it's okay because I'll often say to people, well, give me a scenario, tell me what you're concerned about, and nothing's going to shock me. I've pretty much read and seen and been involved with cases that are horrific, so horrific that you actually don't even jerry that they're real.
Yeah.
So nothing's going to shock me. So lay it all out on the table so we know what we're working with here.
I think especially because the harm of children is so hard to fathom, because most people go into early childhood education or some sort of early child education, whether you become a preschool teacher or an early childhood educator or whatever it is, they go into it because they actually care about kids and they like kids. You don't go into it most of the time. There might be a few people who fall into it because they think it was an easy way to get paid or whatever reason for, or there are other reasons. I don't know. There is nothing worse. I used to go into early childhood education centers when I was dropping my daughter off, or I was like, give me a drunk person to wrestle on a Friday night outside the pub, and anytime. Like, you know what I mean? Like, give me a search warrant, drug search warrant, kicking a door in, like, give me whatever. I'm happy. Give me a child interview, like, seriously, but give me 30 kids in an early childhood education centre running around outside. I'd be running for the hills, and like, so you don't go into these industries not caring about kids.
You don't. And you genuinely want children to be thriving and happy. And I think that's what's so unsettling, and that's often the angle that we need to use, don't we, where we're going, you know what, as upsetting and uncomfortable this is for you, this isn't about you.
No.
This is about you.
I'm glad you said that, because I used to have to say that to parents, and this is the truth, right? It's not about you. This is about kids. This is about kids' child safety. This is about, this is about setting boundaries and being the safe person in that child's life and making sure that they understand what safe is so that they can come to you if they're not safe.
That's exactly right. I don't think there is any, and many parents think, I don't want to have that conversation because I don't want to give them insight into an adult world or tell them about something that they are not ready for. They already know.
Most of them do. To some extent, to some way, it's in their world anyways.
And unfortunately, with the rapid rate of online or tech, tech facilitated abuse, so much harm has come. Tech, don't get me wrong, I think tech is amazing for connection and belonging for many, many children, particularly who are remote or to connect with culture.
Yeah.
I think that's something, a lot of services will often avoid tech altogether because it's too scary to be in control of. But that then is at detriment to children that need that connection or who are perhaps neurodiverse and would prefer not to be out or have difficulty with social environments. So there are absolutely positives for that, but there's also that rapid rate of exposure to harm that we have to get real with.
And we have to get it right. Like, we can't just, I was having a laugh. I don't know if it was last night. Maybe it was last night on the news or something about, there was a report. My 88-year-old dad lives with me and my 18-year-old lives with me. So there's 3 generations, massive 70-year gap between my dad and my daughter. Yeah. And so laughing because on the news last night there was a report about grandparents thinking that this generation of parents is making mistakes and being too lenient and not having, not enforcing certain rules. Anyway, whatever they were sprouting on the news, my dad goes, "What a load of shit. It's up to the parents how they do it." And I was like, and he's been pretty supportive of, like, he never steps over like anything and says anything about how we parent or parented.
Yeah.
You don't parent an 18-year-old, you just suggest now. But yeah, so, that's the thing. And so it was quite funny how he was like, you don't tell people how to bring their kids up or how to raise their kids. You just, you support, and you might, if they ask for support or ask for suggestions, that's when you offer it. And I was like, wow, it's quite an interesting way. And you know what? He was pretty good like that. But other parents and my point is that with regards to tech, I had to laugh to myself because I've got obviously more grandparents, and some of those haven't been great with tech. They've just like handed over the phone, handed over the device.
Yeah.
And they've not really thought what's the repercussions of this. So tech, if done safely and well, can be a great support for kids and young people and families. But if done with no boundaries and no guidelines and no safety net, then it's not so great.
I saw a really good quote yesterday must have been on the socials, and it was, tech's only as safe as their best mate's lack of tech, intervention. And I'm like, yeah, so true. Because I think I came off a
it's so true.
pornography conference years ago. And so, of course, I get off and, do a bit of a test with my own children. And I'm like, oh, they were talking about infiltration into games today and blah, 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 blah. And so I asked all of them, and they're like, oh, again. I'm like, no, come on. I just really need to get this. I need this understanding. And so then they would reel off when's the first time they saw content, and it was always at someone else's house.
Exactly. If you can learn anything, it's not at you can do all of the greatest things, but when they're at their friend's house or even on the school bus or at school where their friends have got access to it, that's where they're going to see it.
Yeah, and this is the thing, and that's why I often say when I'm talking to services and educators about tech safety, I said you have a non-negotiable to include how to protect yourself and how into your curriculum so children know what to do when they're not with you, when they are at the caravan park over Easter or they're at the basketball stadium. And your luck as being working in the police force is that one of the 4 children, he was the youngest, and not because of exposure by his older siblings. He was at his mate's house and their both parents were feds.
And that's where he's exposed. Do you know what? I'm going to say this straight out. Anyone listening, sorry, but teachers and police officers usually have the worst support safety nets around their kids because we either are too tired, we're sick of listening and talking about it. We can be the worst at it. I mean, I only had 1 child, so I reckon if I had 4, I probably would have got to the last one and been like, whatever.
Look, there's a bit of that having 4. I'm like, oh, I probably am way more lax on some stuff with you than I was, particularly with your older sister.
It happens though. And I mean, we're real about this, Nicole.
We are real about this. And I also think, I have never shied away from uncomfortable conversations with my children because I figure that the uncomfortableness is often, whether it's them or me, it's really about, I don't care how we have this conversation, but this content has to come into the air.
I actually shared a quote yesterday. It's from, I don't know who said it, but it says, you have hard conversations today or hard consequences tomorrow.
So, see, I love that. Right.
And so because the consequences of not having the conversation is really, they can be more difficult than having the conversation.
Exactly right. And I said, and you can pretend that you're not listening to me, but the reality is when something goes down that you think, oh, that's scary, that's not right, whatever, hopefully that little button pops in your head and goes, I remember Mum saying something about this, and I shut her down. So I'll often say, just give me 5 minutes, 2 minutes. I just got to tell you the important parts.
Well, this is really interesting because I often get parents say, my teen doesn't want to talk to me, my child doesn't want to listen, then they're disengaging and stuff like that. So what would you say? I mean, you've got 4 kids of probably all different personalities and learning types.
And it's funny because I often think, what would I do as a parent, or what would I advise as a child and wellbeing practitioner, which I was for the last 2 years in, statutory and non-statutory services. And a lot of that was disengaged children in very complex. I worked in the reunification and response team for children that children have been removed or have just recently been reunited with their families. And a lot of those children had complex family lives.
Histories.
Things to navigate, and a lot of it was disengagement and not being able to communicate. And what I often say is you got to pick a time that, and I sometimes blend it in between what would I do as the parent and the professional, and then somehow go for a bit of a mix in between. And so you've really got to, and if you think about it, like nobody really likes sitting down to have a serious conversation.
No, never.
It's got to be, you've got to be able to move.
Oh, sorry. You say that, but I actually love really getting deep diving into shit and I'm one of those weird people, but I agree with you. If you want to engage with it, most people don't even want to have that conversation.
No. So you've got to be able to have that flexibility of being able to get up and go if you want
to move.
That transparency at the beginning. And that's what I used to do with my own children, but that's also what I would recommend to families that were really struggling with communicating and setting boundaries. And I would say, look, the reality is you can give it a go. And I think sometimes language is not something that, teenagers don't want to talk. Text, how do they communicate? By text. So I'd say send some key information by text.
Yeah.
If it's dealing with if it's trying to address promiscuous behaviour or sneaking out at night or taking alcohol and other drugs, it'll be key little messages of how do you be safe if you're going. Yeah.
Yeah, if you're going to take the risk, then how do you do it safely?
Exactly right. And know that at the end of the day, whatever happens, nothing's ever going to be bad enough that you can't tell me and I can't help you. It doesn't mean that I might not be angry, disappointed. I can be all of those things. Yeah. How do you go out of the house with a safety plan?
Yeah.
And what does that look like and how user-friendly is it for the child that you're working with?
Yeah. Yep. I agree with you 1,000% because the thing is we act like we never did anything. People go around treating teenagers and young people like you didn't sneak out or you didn't tell your parents you were here when you were over here or you didn't drink before you turned 18. We act like we're superior when actually we did all of those things, right? But we did them without the support of someone who we could talk to and share with. And I'm not saying we green light anything, right? I'm not saying you say to them, you can do whatever you want, free for all. But I'm saying if you've got a young person who you can't even sit down and have a safety conversation with and they're not freaking out or telling you to rack off or they're like, I don't have time or I don't want to.
Yeah.
Hey, I realize on the weekend you're going to go and do something. Yeah. Can you just keep this in mind? And if you get stuck, make sure you can call me. Yeah. And I did that. My daughter finished year 12 before, and she's a February baby, so she didn't turn 18 until this year. Yeah. So she was going out partying on weekends, and I just said, ring me. I will pick you up from anywhere. Just be mindful that you're only drinking your alcohol,
And this is the key to them being able to measure their own risk. And even if they slip up a bit, it's almost domino effect now down through our family, because the 21-year-old is like second mother. Then the oldest son, the nearly 17-year-old, calls him and says,
Yeah.
"Hey, you come get me."
Yeah.
So it might not be cool to have your mum come and collect you, but your
Older brother.
your 19-year-old brother can come and get you. That's okay.
Yeah.
So, and if you don't have that luxury, I would even say to clients, I would say, just make sure that they've got a phone that works,
Yeah.
or
Got
that
credit.
you got credit. Like, it's all those little things. Or you might not want to text or call me, but can you give me a thumbs up
Yeah,
to
that
say
you're safe and
you're
okay.
alive and breathing and I'm okay?
Yeah.
Keep your locations on, which again, even my own children, they turn them off.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, and I'm like,
That's
really?
a rule in our family. It doesn't matter where you are, what you're doing. Like, again, it's interesting. Like, people must think, I'm sure based on what I say, and I've been mulling over this because I've had a few really interesting comments on my socials lately.
Right.
Quite aggressive, like, because I said, and you'll know from working with the people you've worked with and the situations you work with, when there's multiple children or an adult and a child, or a child and a device, and there's a closed bedroom door, that situation is no longer considered safe. Now, the reason being is that because when we have multiple children in a bedroom, they could be looking at something inappropriate or unsafe. They could be doing something inappropriate or unsafe. When you have an adult and a child, the child doesn't feel there's a power imbalance. The child doesn't feel like they can leave the room. And then we don't know what the adult's doing.
Yeah.
And then if you add in a child and a device, again, so these are three really unsafe situations where it's not safe to have a closed door. But the way I said it is, I think I can't remember how I quoted it, but I said, in my experience as a detective, closed doors are unsafe. And I've had people jump up and down saying, what about privacy? Your red flags all over, blah, 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 blah. Someone said to me, what in the coercive control are you talking about? And I'm like, come on, watch the whole thing. It's 2.5 minutes.
Exactly. And, the reality is a closed door is unsafe. How are you going to, and I know my own children will constantly go in, there is, you can close the door, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to knock and annoy you or come in and ask you something or whatever. So there's not going to be unlimited contact without me.
Exactly. And I mean, look, I don't doubt that if you want to, children need privacy. They need to be able to change in private. They need to go to the bathroom and toilet in private. But if you add a device in there, it's no longer a safe space because who knows who's on the other end of the device. If you add another child or another adult and an adult who, with a closed door, there's no reason for doors to be closed when we're safe.
Absolutely.
And I get that there's some exceptions to that rule. But however, anyway, they're jumping up and down on my socials at the moment.
Yeah, and often it's, I find that when people jump up and down, it's because you've probably called out something that they know and they're not practicing.
Or they're not, they don't want to admit that that's actually true.
Exactly right.
Oh, look, you can't do anything right on social media. And like, we know that it's good and bads. It has its good and bads. But with me and with you, like, we're in the forefront of calling stuff out. You started the medical emergency bag, right? Because you knew that. So the thing is that you've been at the forefront of trying to protect kids through solutions and training for a long time.
Yeah.
I think this is what makes it really hard. Sometimes when you're in the front of this, people are quick to tear you down and say it's not a problem here. Have you found that with what you've been, I mean, you were at the front of all of this child safety.
Yeah. And I think I have to say that, look, I think it's probably been helpful for me in that I had been in the sector for so long, and I think had always been advocating for child rights for a long time and treating children as citizens. So I think when I started to actually broach with services, if I was mentoring them or if I was doing a training session or speaking at a conference, it was not a new concept for people to hear me advocating for the rights of children. So when I was then able to say, there are a number of things that you've got to actually consider. The risks have to be addressed. It was coming from a good space and, foregrounding children in that. And so I really feel like I haven't really, touch wood, I haven't really had anybody try and go,
push back.
yeah, I really feel like I feel quite lucky in that. I really feel like I've been championed in what I've been saying for a long time in this space. And so when Early Childhood Australia asked me to be part of the rapid
Review.
task force, I actually felt like I was really pleased about that, because even though I have consulted independently for so long, it was a nice way, but I've been on the Early Childhood Australia. I've been involved with them for a long time through committees and groups, but it was a really great way to be able, for people that had worked with me or had been involved with me over the last 30 years, I think that they know that generally I am really, really protective of teachers and educators in this space. And I don't want anything to happen to children, of course not. But I also recognize how the impact that has on, on educators when harm does come to children.
Yep.
So I think being able to really be really robust in this message now it's landing well.
Well, it's
Because
a nod to it's like a tick and a nod and a like, hey, if you're a service that has engaged you over the last 30 years or 20 years, however long, it's like you were actually in the forefront of this. You're actually been doing this a lot longer than the average person, because some of the services are like, like you said, we said at the very beginning, like they're saying this is hard, this is too much, but actually there's services out there that have been doing this well for a long time, and there's people out there that have been doing it. And so it's the fact is that everything you've been saying has actually proven that. And we, again, not a great feeling for us, but hey, this is actually really important, because we know that these people are out there trying to infiltrate early childhood education and families, and they're there and they've always been there. It's just that they're making it became easier for them to be there.
Yeah.
And so I think it's basically like validating what you've been doing for so long and saying, hey, you're on the right, like you're on the right path, being your
it has been this, but I think also too, when there's people like yourself that are wanting to reach out and connect, and I think when you're actually invested in solidarity and building connections, and you're constantly growing, whether it be connections, knowledge, understanding, insight, I think that makes a difference too, because people don't perhaps look at us and go, okay, well, they've done their work and now they're just sitting back and saying, well, there you go, you know what to do. It's really a personable approach to this. And I think that's what people need, because you need some level of, there needs to be some level of emotion in it for people to go, okay, they're personable and they're telling us this. It lands differently. It's more powerful when you see people are, they're continuously growing what they know and who they know.
And they're not trying to hold it all into, like, they're not trying to, like, doing a golem in Lord of the Rings, my precious, this is mine. This is my secret. This is my stuff. This is, like, literally years ago, a couple of things were going through my head as you were explaining, like, how it's come about and stuff. And one of the things that was told to me years ago by a senior constable, first of all, he said to me, I was straight out of the academy, and he said, Kristi, it takes just as much, if not more energy to pretend you're doing the right thing and to fake and write the reports and do all of the things and not do the work than it is to just bloody do the work. So just bloody do the work. Like literally he goes, and I mean, he was referring to policing and bad policing and the fact that some police officers would pretend that they'd gone and done all the work and pretend and try and write it off as best they could. But he said, just go and do the work, because it takes less time and energy, and it's not as hard as people make it out to be.
And you're going to know. You're going to learn from it, right?
You're going to learn. And then the other thing that was popping into my head was the fact is that there is never enough people in this space. There is
Correct.
never. I learn differently to you. What I say is different to the next person. It doesn't matter if. And I have one of my really good friends in this space was a detective and she's got a psych degree and a criminology degree, and she's amazing. She taught me in detective training. She's one of my great friends. And she said to me very early on when I left the police and was thinking about going into this space, she said, there's more than enough. There's never enough for people talking about this. Oh. And that's how I've been since day one. I've gone, it doesn't matter who's teaching you it as long as you learn it. Absolutely. And so as long as because if you really care about protecting kids, then it's not about you. And I used to say this when I was releasing my book, when I was doing something, when I was speaking out loud, I would say, it's not about me. It's about the kid I can protect. It's about the person who learns something that's going to protect them. It's not about me.
If one person learns one thing, then that's a better space.
Yeah. One of the things I also wanted to say is, I really feel, and remember, I'm pretty sure you know the stats, it's only about 2% that children get harmed actually in early childhood education. It's around 2%, right? I say this all the time. They're more likely to be harmed in the home or by a family member or someone that's actually in the family, yet the spotlight is so massive, shining on early childhood education in schools. Yeah. And I'm like, and for good reason, because no one expects it there. But I always try and throw this in when I get interviewed about it, right? I always throw it in. I'm like, well, actually, this is not the key issue. The key issue is any harm to children, and they're more likely to be harmed outside of this space, right? That's I was trying to throw it into Channel 7 and Channel 9.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But the second part to that is that most people, I have specialized training. I have spent 10 years in the police. I spent being mentored and taught how to investigate this stuff, how to deal with this stuff. My mental health was affected by this stuff. Everyday educators, the people on the floor dealing with children's disclosures, having to talk to kids when they disclose and having to deal with this stuff have not got the training that I have or had.
No.
And it's so unfair. And I say this to educators all the time. It's so unfair.
Absolutely. And which is probably part of the reason why I am really passionate about supporting, the teachers and the educators to ensure that a lot of and I will advocate for them I say, use part of if they have programming time, I will say child safety isn't separate to that, and nor is your well-being in being able to deal with that. So I will always say, even if it's 10 minutes, if you have hypothetically 4 hours, if you actually just block out 15 minutes where you can do your self-care, that might mean that you get up and you walk because you're not counted in ratio, you go and walk around the block. You need to inject self-care into part of that programming plan, because you're going to be a better educator when you make time for that and prioritize time for that. And I also think part of that time needs to be about you growing what you know. And that might be, readings or, you don't even have to read academic stuff. It can be anything that is going to give you, expand that brain a bit, because that's going to actually give you some of the joy that you also need as a professional. So they
don't take them seriously enough. Like, honestly, the early childhood like I said, you could not pay me. I would rather wrestle a drunk on Friday night in the middle of the friggin' city than go and be an educator. And I love kids,
That's
Nicole.
Right. It's hard work.
It is terrible, and they're not given enough respect and enough
pay.
I swear, I will jump on a soapbox and say they deserve way more money. And I do say this all the time, because we have relegated it to this, like, it's below teaching, it's below everything. Tell me any other person in this world who deserves better quality care than children.
And and I think that's why I have been banging on for so many years about children are citizens now, and how are you supporting that in your spaces, and what opportunity are you giving them to be able to have a say in the local community? How are we supporting this? Because children don't just grow up and go on to be able to engage in the social world. You know, a lot of my work, particularly this year, has been focusing on looking at power dynamics. I'm actually doing a presentation for New South Wales Family Daycare tonight online, but it's looking at power in play and how do we diffuse and look at some of those moments that do come up in play where there is a power imbalance. You know, years ago, 30 years ago, we used to call that pack play. That's not pack play. That's a group of children that are getting some level of dominance over others in the space. So how are we uplifting those that you've got to be attuned and you've got to notice, and you've got to sometimes be able to lean in with curiosity and be curious and wonder about what you're hearing and what you're seeing. So children not only get to hear that, hang on, I don't need to be bossed around like this, but also that means that you're not thinking about the rights of the other people in your space. And I really am focused on that at the moment, because I just, you know, half of my social posts are about advocating for femicide. And,
Yep.
you know, I did a training, as you know, this afternoon on, you know, what does care and wellbeing and what does child-centered practice look like after fatal family homicide. And, you know, there's so much family violence that we need to be working with intentionality in our curriculums with the youngest of citizens. Give them a safe, secure platform that they may not get anywhere else.
Yes,
where they can explore, you know, gender roles in a safe space, because, you know, children come in with bias. They just do. Everybody has bias. We've got to give them a safe, secure opportunity to play in the dramatic play spaces and be curious about what we're hearing, because it might be something like, you know, and I often say to educators, what barriers are you placing between what you truly see because of your own bias?
Yes. Your unwritten biases, you know, they're under the surface. You don't even know you have them. And they're from your families and your, you know, own experiences. I mean, I have them, you have them, everyone has them.
I always say, don't be afraid of them, because they'll pop up when you least expect it. It's how you
all the time.
And
when you're aware of them, you're like, fuck.
I know. And you're like, oh my God.
Why did I say that? That's so not me. Like, but that's something that I was taught.
Right.
One of the biases that I have that is actually not mine, and my daughter calls me out on, is whenever, and she, you know, she's her own adult. She comes out dressed like a certain way or like with certain clothes, and my mother comes out. I'm like, shit. And like, I try really hard to like can program that and uncondition that.
Yeah.
But that conservative Catholic, you know, belief system still comes out, and I've got no problems with that. But she's her own individual who gets to choose, and I shouldn't have any say in that.
I know, but there's also that flip side that you also know what's out there, right?
I know.
You know, and I am a strong, whole family know I'm a really strong feminist, and I am probably more wild than any of my children. But I also know that, you know, you got to have your wits about you, because
you got to know what's out there. Like, again, be prepared. There's a saying like, prepare one. The person who's prepared is the person who succeeds, or something like that. I can't remember the full quote, but, you know, like for me, you know, we do know that, and sometimes it does. But again, like, sometimes we need to like let kids learn for themselves without our biases in it. And, you know, in the early childhood setting, we don't actually have to, there's not, you know, we have to step in when it gets dangerous or when it gets harmful or when everyone's not safe. But again, some of the things that we teach, like bodily autonomy, consent, you know, consideration for others, and all of these things, these are lessons that should start early on.
Absolutely. You know, consent, we know, is something that adults, you know, how many campaigns have they had to put on the TV about consent?
Consent is in everything.
Right? And consent, and people say, well, how do we do that in early childhood? There's consent in everything. What you want?
Is it okay? Would you like help? Do you want this?
How do we do that with babies and toddlers? Easy. They'll tell you. You'll know when they're not happy about something. Their body language will tell you. And some children don't know how to place a boundary. So we've got to support them with the language or the tools. And it's about, can I help you with this? Would you like a hand?
Would you like to do it yourself?
Exactly.
Oh, look at you go. You're doing a great job. Well done.
Yeah, see, and I absolutely hear what you're saying too, where sometimes, I know with my own child, I've always, probably again, because I know what's out there and I know little pockets around Melbourne where I know there is,
Yeah.
hotspots, right? And so one of them said that he's joined the gym and I said, how are you getting there from school, catching the train to a certain station and then the bus? And I said, and instantly, it's how you quieten down those biases to not stifle someone. And I went, all right, the youngest of 4, I probably wouldn't have allowed this with the others, but okay. And I'm literally saying, okay, but when you're walking through the train station, have you got your face glued in your phone? Can you
Have you
please?
got earphones in?
Correct, right? And I'm saying all of these things. I said, you need to have your wits about you. And have you ever noticed the police or other people that you could get help? Yep. Don't have your phone and not pay attention. Put things away. Just be mindful of how you can.
Well, be confident in that moment, all of those. And it's so funny because my daughter brought this up the other day. She said to me, oh yeah, where I park my car for work, it's actually, and it's getting darker now and everything.
Yeah.
She's like, I have to be careful when I'm crossing the road and when there's people in the car park because they're not all the people that I work with. And I'm sometimes walking over there on my own and I'm like, like, like mother fear. And I was like, okay, have you considered maybe parking closer to the front? You're there the earliest. Like, could you park at the front? Could you make sure that someone's with you when you're walking? How do you and because they have to navigate this stuff, right?
And I think when you first go, no, you're not going there. Well, if I had said you're not going there, probably would have gone there anyway, even though on the where are you, I can see. But it's it's about that whole, like with your daughter, navigating, co-creating. I'm really big on co-creating the risk safety plan, right? Let's co-create what could happen. How could it happen? Where the risk is. Can we bring that risk down a bit with some ideas on how to bring your safety up? I'm not saying don't do it. What I'm saying is how can we make it safer for you? Because I know you want to.
Yeah. And that's a really good, I think for parents, we can't say, like I grew up with no, right?
Yeah.
Everything was a no. And if you did it anyway, or, you just hid it from your parents.
Right.
I think from my experience and what I've seen in the police with parenting and young people is that if your child is sometimes you can talk it through and maybe it is a no in the end because they can't find a safe way to do it. And they choose not to do it because they realize it's not safe.
Correct. Yeah.
But that's about having those conversations and talking it through and going, is there a way to do this safer? Like when my daughter went on levers, I was like, I didn't want her to go on levers.
Yeah.
Because I was like, there's all these toolies, there's all these idiots, like the drinking and all of this stuff. And she wasn't 18 yet, but we talked it through. I was like, is there any way to make me feel more comfortable?
Yeah.
Like she's a kid that contacts me all the time, but she didn't contact me all week. And I was like, holy crap, what's going on? And I had to send her a message a couple of times, like, just like, are you alive?
Yeah. Well, it'll make you feel better to know that because when's my daughter, hadn't finished social work when she went because she's too old. It must have been my son because he finished. Yeah, it would have been. They all blend in. But he was going to schoolies and he was going to Byron. And I knew from my daughter going that a number of things had happened, drink spiking and the needle pricks, all of these things. And so I would say, don't drink in anything that you're not taking the lid off yourself or opening the can yourself. And the other thing was I said, it'll make you feel better. I said, hey, I'm a social worker now. Do you want me to come be is it a red frog or a green frog, whatever it is? And they're like, absolutely not. And I said, okay, but can you just find out where they are because they'll help you?
Yeah. We have a really good program in WA. So in Western Australia, one of the spots is Dunsborough, which is south near the Margaret River, right?
Yeah.
They have, so to be able to go into the leavers zone, they have to catch a bus in and they have to catch a bus out. The bus goes to all of their accommodation spots. Like they've got special accommodation spots. They have a special armband. They had like all of those, I don't know what they're called here. Like they had special people, but like thousands of people, thousands of like support the kids. Yeah. I didn't, because once I knew more about it, here's the other thing. I think learn about and help your child understand where they could. In the end, she had the best week. She had her mates there. They looked after each other. You know, like she had the best week. I'm so glad she had that experience because it was one of those like, you know, I never had that experience. I was working full time by then. You know, like
people remember it.
Yeah. But you can do it. You can do it.
And you can do it safely.
So I think that's one of the things that, you know, I think hiding from things we fear, hiding from the problem, not being brave and going, right, this is here. We got to do something about it. And whether it be with your own children, whether it's in your service, whether it's in your family, whatever.
You just got to actually sit with the uncomfortable.
I think that is the best way we can both explain what we do. We sit with the uncomfortable and like tear the rule book.
That's it. And then do something about it.
And then rewrite it.
Yeah, that's it.
How can people find out more about what you do, Nicole? Like if they want to engage you or if they want to read your book?
You know, I'm often posting great resources, great tools. If I'm out and about in services and I see really fantastic things happening or, you know,
you share them.
So you can follow Talarico Consulting on Insta or...
I'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, and otherwise LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. I think I haven't checked my Google rating. I should because I always get spam every day saying, hey, do you want to improve your Google search rate? No. I Google my name, I might pop up, but otherwise...
Yeah. I'm sure you will pop up.
Who knows? Accordingly... to the spam that I get daily, I'm not sitting at the top there with my strike rate, so who knows?
Who is? They just like to tell us that we're not.
We're busy to check stuff like that, you know. Anyway, thank you so much. I have loved having this chat with you. Oh, should we do a photo for the socials while we're on it?
I'm just going to, we will do a photo. I'll share everything, but I'm just going to press stop in a second.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you so much. And I will make sure everyone knows how to find anything that you're doing, your medical emergency bags. I reckon there's some great things coming out for you in the next 12 months. I have a feeling.
I have a feeling about you too.
Nicole said something near the end of this conversation that I keep coming back to. We sit with the uncomfortable and then we do something about it. That's it. That's the whole job. Not waiting until something goes wrong, not doing the bare minimum to tick a box, but actually getting in there, having the hard conversations and doing the work before you need to. Whether you're a parent, an educator, or someone who works with kids in any capacity, this episode is a reminder that safety isn't something that just happens. It's something that you build. You can find Nicole over on Instagram and Facebook at Talarico Consulting or connect with her on LinkedIn. I'll link everything in the show notes anyways, including her book, which I genuinely think should be on every educator's shelf. Thanks for being here. Thanks for having these hard conversations with us, and I'll see you in the next episode.